Hey there, welcome back to Surviving Animation, your guide to making it in the business of cartoons. My name is Eric Calderon. This is a very special episode because I am here with Emily Brundige, who has written a fantastic book called A Guide to Developing Animated Shows. So it is a must read. I actually went through the whole thing in one day. And, I think it's basically the save the cat for animation. It's one of the best resources you could possibly have out there for development. So, Emily, thanks for joining the show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Eric, and thanks for the very flattering compliments about my book.
That's no problem.
Um,
No problem. Easy to do.
yeah, just really quickly, I'm a writer, showrunner. I recently created a show called Goldie for Apple TV Plus. I also created Pubertina for YouTube in the early YouTube days. And yeah, recently I've written this book and it's been getting some crazy praise from superstars in animation like Joe Brumm, who created Bluey.
The chosen one has chosen you.
Yes, I still
That
can't
is
believe
great.
it.
Yeah, well, it's well deserved. There's a ton of accolades coming your way, but I'd love to start now that you kind of told us the basics of some of your career. I mean, what was the reason you decided to pivot from the successful career in writing shows into writing a book about development?
So the reason was because I've just been asked so many times by aspiring creators, if I can look at their pitches or meet for coffee or whatnot. And, I'm a mom and a busy person, so it's just not possible. And I thought, well, what kind of feels right for me since I'm a writer is putting that all into a book, um, putting all my development secrets into a book that people know where to buy and can just dive into it and go forth with their development journey. Um, and so I tried to make it really user friendly. There are a lot of worksheets. And I really tried to go through, be very thorough and go through the whole process of development, everything that I know. And then the other thing that I think is pretty cool is I develop a show with the reader in the book. So I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk too.
That is a fascinating part of your book. I mean, I think one of the reasons that it's so readable is, first of all, it's written in this kind of naturally bouncy personal prose. It's not super, howdy touty academic. It's very grounded, but it does actually allow the reader to watch you through your thought process. And you actually, if I'm correct, as my memory of reading it from 2 days ago, is that you create a full show that you actually put the show Bible for itself at the end.
Yeah, yeah. I was almost not going to do that, but I thought, oh, it would just be so helpful to have the actual show pitch, show Bible at the end. So, yeah, along with getting all the information I put into this book, readers also get a sample pitch Bible, which I think is really invaluable, especially coming
It's
from an
great. It's great.
experienced showrunner and pitch person.
Absolutely. So when you wrote this book, did you have kind of a person in mind, or who do you think is the right type of person to read this book?
Well, I think that it's right. It's definitely right for people who are beginning this journey and have dreams of creating a show, either um, produced by a network or produced independently, but don't really know where to start, or don't know how to develop. Maybe they got stuck somewhere. And then I think it's also helpful to more experienced showrunners and creators, because it just clarifies a lot of what we already know, but I think in a way that, um, I don't know, it's just a very good reminder of these very basic elements all shows should have. And in some cases, these more experienced creators haven't really thought about certain things that I put in the book. So I've
I
heard
totally
that it
agree.
can be really helpful to people of
Yeah,
all experience levels.
I totally agree. I mean, as someone who's been in the industry for almost 30 years now, when I kind of went through your book, I felt like an old boxer who kind of had to go back to his first coach. And after I read through things, I was, oh, right, I have been forgetting to do that. I do need to remind myself to do this. So I think, all levels, whether it's your first time or totally experienced, is totally valid to read this book. But I also want to bring up something now that I thought about it, which is it's not just good to read for anyone. It's very good to read in 2025 because I realize what you kind of directly addressed is that the industry is in a difficult spot. And I think it'd be almost easy to just kind of go into this negative zone of like, oh,
Yeah,
nothing's going to
yeah.
work out. But I think you really find a way to make it possible to do things again.
And like I was really speaking from an honest place because I see a lot of opportunity in this in 2025 as far as entertainment goes. I feel that there's a lot of space for independent creators, not just to go the traditional route. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think what your book covers is that, whether you're a beginner and you have nothing and no connections and just a dream, there's a path for you. And if you're in the middle and you've been doing it the regular way, but it's not working, there's a path you haven't thought about. And if you're super experienced and need to try something more fresh, maybe you need to get out of the old ways of thinking and start fresh new again. So I really appreciated that. So, okay, so let's, if you don't mind, let's get into some of the things that your book talks about. Obviously, we want people to buy your book. We want people to get the full experience, but give us a couple of basic tips that you think are, on your list of people always forget to think about X or Y or Z.
yeah, for sure. So, my number one tip that I see a lot, especially with people who are in the beginning of their careers, is you have an idea and you like that idea, but you don't stop to kind of think about how it fits in with the landscape of what's already out there and been done, and also whether or not your idea speaks to the moment that we're in. Because you want it to work with the context of the world we're living in, and I think that's just sometimes ignored by people. And then also you have to ask yourself who your show is for, because you're just not doing yourself any favors to not make those decisions. I know you might feel like you don't want to put your show in a box, but I think in this case, you have to, you know, whether it's preschool, bridge, 6 to 11, adult, Y7. I mean, there's so many categories. Just you got to choose a lane, basically. And also, give the basic information like how long your episodes, you see your episodes being, and the tone is something important that helps. If you can describe your tone, maybe by referencing some other shows or movies that people know that it kind of is like, or just do a good job of describing whether it's like a dramedy or a comedy adventure series. You just want to give your reader like a baseline understanding of what your show is going to be.
I mean, I'd like to talk about that a little bit because I think
Yeah.
what I find interesting is, in your experience in both development and writing, there's a change in tone, right? There's a development way of speaking, and then there's a writer's way of writing. And I think it's
Hmm.
important for everyone to see in this book is that you cover a lot of how development people think and how development people make decisions and the kind of triggers that make them realize this is something they're interested in. But on the other side, as a
Yeah.
writer, it's just kind of like a different chemistry. It's a different structure because you've got someone to sit down, you've got someone to watch, and now you've got to go through the different discipline of writing a piece of fiction.
Right. And writing to sell something,
Correct. Correct.
not just writing to make yourself happy.
That's great.
Unfortunately,
That's
if
great.
you're trying
Yeah.
to sell a show, then the language you use, you want to think about things like, are you putting up front the hook of your show? What's unique about it? What's going to grab people's attention? You want to think about those things to make your show stand out right away.
And I think that is, if you'll agree or disagree, kind of a weakness, I think, in the relative training programs that a lot of writers have is that, whether an animation writer or a live action writer, you spend so much time learning the craft, learning the actual discipline of what it takes to like put a screenplay to bed, put a TV episode to bed. But the whole different set of skills of writing styles that you talk about is the marketing of it. And that
Yeah.
audience is a B2B audience. So your book in a way, do you feel like it's more for a B2B audience because of that?
Sorry, what do you mean by B2B
It's
audience?
like,
I don't
yeah,
know that
it's funny because the kind of,
terminology.
yeah, the kind of executive I am here in my
Yeah.
t-shirt is that
I guess I
there's
only
B2B,
understand
which
some
is
executive speak, not all of it.
it's funny because we're kind of like we're kind of a yin yang because
Yeah.
I've been executive, I'd say like 70% of the time, and a writer 30% of the time, where I feel like you're at the other side. So kind of in the executive room and in the board when we talk about B2B, which is a business to business conversation, right? So if I'm at
Right.
a production company and that production company is selling a project to a broadcaster, we're both just businesses. Like we haven't touched the consumer yet, so we're
Yeah.
just trying to figure out how to do business together. And once you
Right, right.
agree, then the talent makes the piece of entertainment for the consumer.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You want to be thoughtful about what you're presenting to this person who could fund your project. You want to be honest. Like if you say, I imagine this series being 100-hour long episodes, and you're not really in touch with how expensive animation is and um, thoughtful about that aspect of making a show, um, then you're going to seem pretty out of touch. And it's better if you
Correct.
can speak the language a little bit more.
That's correct. One of the things I appreciated about your book was the reminder to people about networking, about meeting people, because even some of the basic vernacular that we use in the development world just might not be common knowledge for people who are purely in the production side. And I think getting into development, what your book talks about, is like you got to mix it up with some of those execs, you got to mix it up with some of those buyers, and you got to watch all their shows and read a couple of trades and go to a couple of licensing
Yeah,
events
yeah.
to
And
really
I
get
think a
there.
lot of writers and creators and artists are natural introverts. So I think this is a situation where you need to really push yourself. Um, because if no one's looking for your, $1 million idea, like you need to show them and get to them. So
Right.
if there are any animation events in wherever you're living, definitely go. Um, it might be a good idea to visit LA if you know that something's happening. Definitely don't move to LA right now, but you can visit and try to attend events. And also on the internet, if you're making friends with artists and other creative people, try to collaborate on something. There are a lot of ways to kind of get in the mix, as you say.
Agreed. Agreed. So let's talk about another point of your book I want to think about, which is, when I read it, from my experience, I would say there's a ton of information that I was like, okay, I knew this, I knew this, I'm getting it read to me again, kind of in a more concise way. It's a great reminder. But in there, do you think there are a couple of surprises, something that maybe people who have read it, who have given you feedback that said, oh, that was a big epiphany for me. That was something I haven't tried before. Just like give us a little teaser of, some of the not so common advice that you think is really important that you highlight in your book.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really, really emphasize, that's maybe another thing that people who are new to this might not think about, is that you need to have a strong story engine for your show before you sell it. And a story engine is basically the mechanics of how your stories are born. What's the driving conflict in the premise that drives your character towards some goal? Um, like you can break down any show, and there's a clear explanation for what drives the stories, any good show. And I think that if you don't make sure that your show works on that level, that it can spawn many stories, or if you're going for a limited series, that it can create a really compelling story, then you kind of have to go back to the drawing table. Because if you sell a show, say, miraculously, that, you didn't really check to see if the story engine works and it works, you will be in agony because it's really hard if you don't know how your show works to produce it.
I
Um,
think that's a great term. I think, story engine gets used all the time in writers' rooms, all the time in development rooms, but, doesn't often bleed out into the independent world of creativity where they might not know about that structure. In my
yeah,
consultations with people, I remind them of the basic procedurals. When you go from, police, hospital, legal, occupational, family, I mean, these shows are the kinds that in live action, the camera turns on and we just get what happens because the story engine is built into the structure. But what you
yeah.
talk about,
And
which
it
is
doesn't
even,
mean
I
that,
think, more nuanced.
yeah, it doesn't have to be that it creates repetitive stories either.
Correct.
It's to make sure that the stories will all be at least like thematically similar.
Yes.
That there's
Yep.
like a um, united point of view basically to your show.
Right.
Um,
And I won't,
and yeah,
kind of
yeah.
reveal the full detail of your book, but you do a really nice job of talking about like the single character driven story engine versus kind of like the larger group, story engine. They just work on different DNA. But once you
Hmm.
discover the DNA, then suddenly the 20, 30, 40 episodes start to flow because you understand how that engine works. That's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
And
Um,
sometimes I've had ideas I've been excited about and just gotten stuck on how the concept can drive episodes. Like I sometimes I can't figure it out. So it's a really
right.
important part of creating a show for sure.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I think we could talk for hours. I'm almost afraid of all the things that we can cover, but I want to just again congratulate you on a fantastic book. I'm going to be referring people to it over and over again. Tell us how
Thank
to buy
you.
it. Tell us where it's at.
So you can go to my website, www.emilybrundige.com, and get your copy. Right now, I'm selling ebooks. I don't plan to sell hard copies anytime soon. And the ebook is fantastic because you can print out the worksheets and actually use them that way and not draw in the book. So please check it out. And yeah, I hope if you do buy it, you find it useful.
All right. Well, thanks for being on Surviving Animation. I mean, you're the exact kind of, creator and content that I hope people who watch the channel get absorbed into. Please read it and let's talk about it soon. So, thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Eric.